Welcome to the Word for Life podcast, a daily devotional covering the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
In Judges chapter 8, we read about Gideon's self-centered life. Chapter 8 begins with a clash between Gideon and the tribe of Ephraim. You see, in the previous chapter, chapter 7, Gideon had called the tribe of Ephraim to help him in pursuing the Midianites, and the Ephraimites helped Gideon to capture the two Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. However, the Ephraimites are now angry in this chapter 8 with Gideon. They are angry because Gideon did not call them before he went to the war with the Midianites. Fortunately, we read in verse 1 to 3 that Gideon wisely made peace with the tribe of Ephraim. So now there is no fighting between Gideon and the tribe of the Midianites. But later, Gideon is unwise. He starts an unnecessary second war. You see, God did not ask him to do it, but Gideon started another war, probably because he became confident after the first war. From verse 4 we read that Gideon crossed the Jordan and pursued after another two Midianite leaders called Zeba and Zalmunna. Friends, God raises up leaders and empowers them to do His purpose. God empowered Gideon only to do his purpose. But unfortunately, people like Gideon forget this and start living for themselves. But many people of God in the Bible stayed in the calling that God gave them. They did not do what God had not called them to do. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 5 to 6 we read that when Jesus sent out His disciples, He told them, "Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel." Jesus wanted His 12 disciples to be focused on their calling. In Galatians chapter 1 verse 10, Paul says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." But Gideon in this chapter went after his own goals. In verse 4 of chapter 8 we read that Gideon and his men are actually exhausted. They are not able to go after these two other Midianite kings. So in verse 5, they come to an Israelite city called Sukkoth, which is on the other side of Jordan, and they ask for some bread. But verse 6 says, "The officials of Sukkoth said, 'Do you already have the hands of Zeba and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops?'" You see, the people of Sukkoth, even though they were Israelites, did not support Gideon, simply because they were afraid that if Gideon did not finally overcome Zeba and Zalmunna, they would face the wrath of those two kings. So they did not want to support Gideon. But when Gideon learned that the men of Sukkoth will not support him, in verse 7 he replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Zeba and Zalmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." Friends, Gideon is angry here, and in the name of the Lord, he promised vengeance on a city of his own brothers, the Israelites. Then in verse 8, Gideon went to another Israelite city called Peniel. And like the people of Sukkoth, the people of Peniel also did not want to support Gideon. So in verse 9, Gideon said to the men of Peniel, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower." Unfortunately for these two cities, Gideon finally captured and overcame Zebah and Zalmunna. And so, after his victory, Gideon came back to take revenge on these two cities. In verse 16 we read, "He took the elders of the town and taught the men of Sukkoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars." Friends, this means Gideon tore the skin of the elders of Sukkoth with thorns and briars. This was a terrible torture method used by the ancient Assyrians. After tearing people's skin, those people died a gruesome death. And Gideon killed the elders of Sukkoth in such a crude manner. And in verse 17, we read, Gideon came to Peniel and tore down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. And Gideon's revenge continues in verse 18 and 19. Gideon kills Zebah and Zalmunna simply because they killed his own family members. Friends, this is the other side of power. Some leaders become so powerful, and then they begin to use their power for personal reasons. In the first war, Gideon asked his troops to shout, "For the Lord and for Gideon." Now it's all about only Gideon. This self-centered life of Gideon continues in verse 22 also. There, the people of Israel ask Gideon to be their king. First, he refuses, but then he asks for their gold. In verse 27 we read that out of the gold the people of Israel gave him, Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his own town. Interestingly, all the Israelites traveled to Gideon's town and his home to worship that ephod. You see, Gideon, his town, and his family have now become very important and famous because of the ephod. But in the end, Gideon, primarily called to do the Lord's work, had drawn the Israelites away from the Lord. Verse 27 says, "All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and that ephod became a snare to Gideon and his family also." Friends, it is so important for Christian leaders to stay in the calling. In Philippians chapter 3 verse 14, Paul the Apostle says, "I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus."
Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Word for Life podcast.